Hey guys, John here from Bring the SEO. Today I want to share with you 3 of the most regrettable mistakes I made when I first started my SEO agency. These 3 things that I'm about to share with you are very common, especially for independent contractors, consultants, and freelancers, although I do see some small and medium-sized agency owners making the same mistakes. Now, I'm going to share these 3 things with you because I think these are 3 of the biggest, these 3 things caused me the biggest problems. And it's certainly delayed the success or the progression I made within my agency. And hopefully, after I share these points with you, you'll be able to avoid making the same mistakes. So let's jump straight into it. Number 1, I was scared to ask for money. Now this might sound absolutely ridiculous, but I remember when I first quit my government job back in 2006, I'd only ever known and working for an hourly rate. $30 an hour, $40 an hour, whatever it was. And then suddenly I was thrust into this, okay, well, I need to start asking for like $8,500 for a web build and, $1,500 for SEO a month. And I thought, wow, that's almost rude. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, what? But, I'm talking, this is 16 years ago. And making that mindset shift around what might be acceptable in terms of how much money you can actually ask for versus the reality of what is actually possible. I didn't know, I had no sense of comparison. Now again, this might sound very unusual. It's a mindset thing. There's a lot of psychology behind this. And I've had this very same conversation hundreds of times over with other SEO consultants who are like, oh, John, you're telling me I need to charge $2,500 a month or $3,500 a month. Wow, that's really uncomfortable. Especially for SEO consultants who have known nothing but to charge, say, $500 or $600 a month. Making that shift and asking for more money can be tremendously hard and uncomfortable. So what's the solution? For me, I got sick and tired of working, 70, 80 hours a week and having nothing to show for it at the end of the week. That frustration actually worked for me. I used that frustration. I got to the point I said to myself, right, I'm not doing this anymore because I just wasn't charging enough. I started throwing out big numbers. And to my surprise, throwing out a quote or an invoice for $3,500 a month seemed to be no different to charging $1,500 or $1,000 a month. And I was like, what? It really came as a surprise. And then I got to the point where okay, well, and this is the thing, and I say this to a lot of people that I've worked with, a lot of freelancers especially, you only need confirmation, right? Once you've sent someone an invoice for say $2,500 or $3,500 a month and they pay it, it's like this shift happens. It certainly did for me. And I was like, okay, I'm never going back to charging like $1,500 a month. So that's the first thing. You've got to get past that fear of asking for money or asking for more money. Because, and this is the thing, if you don't, someone else will. Now, the next point, and this one might sound very strange, I cared too much. Let me give you an example, because you might be thinking, what on earth, you cared too much? I would start working on projects with clients, and oftentimes, especially when there was web design involved, oftentimes I started feeling like this was something that I owned, something that I was proud of. And I'd often get on calls with clients, and I almost got the impression with some of them that they just didn't care. In many cases, I felt like I cared more than the client. And I'm sure for some of you, you'll be able to relate, like you're doing all of this work, you're getting all of these great results, and the client still isn't happy. And you feel as though you care more than the actual client. Now, the other thing that led to problems here, for me at least, was that I got so emotionally involved in a lot of my projects that when clients cancelled, it really pissed me off. I was like, man, I was working really hard. Look at all this great work that I've done. Now they've cancelled and they've gone with some other agency that's just undone all of my work. That's a problem. You have to remember that clients they're always going to cancel. Eventually, at some point, they're going to cancel. You have to keep a level of professionalism. Don't care too much. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't care at all. Of course you need to care. But you need to remember that this is a business transaction, right? You can't afford to get emotionally involved. I've worked on projects, going back 15, 16, close to 20 years, worked on projects. I was like, nah, I really want to get this right. And I'd be sitting up till 2 o'clock in the morning, only to find that, the client took, 6 weeks to pay the invoice and they weren't really fussed on the work that was being done. That's the other thing. Clients don't care how hard you work. All clients care about is results. So that might sound like unusual advice. Don't care too much. Don't make the mistake of caring too much. And again, this isn't to say that you shouldn't care at all. Yes, you should care, but keep it professional. Now, the last point that I want to share with you here is, and this is my final point, is I didn't hire. I made the mistake that almost every freelance SEO consultant is making right now, and they're trying to do everything themselves. And I think after speaking with hundreds of SEO consultants, typically the reasons I get for not hiring is, well, John, I've tried to hire, it doesn't work. It's just easier if I do it myself. Or they'll say something like, no one can do the work like I can. That is a huge problem. And the reason that happens in almost every single case is because the projects that you're working on have custom requirements. They're one-time projects with custom requirements. The problem with that is that you can't build out repeatable processes. You can't hand someone a checklist for something that has custom requirements. And this is why I push the message around niching down, specializing, working in one industry and doing the same thing over and over and over again. When you do that, you'll be able to implement repeatable processes and get it to a point where your processes and systems are so refined, you can literally slot anyone in. And if you think about it, this is exactly what a lot of the large food chains like KFC, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, and everything else do. They've got 15-year-old kids operating, stores that are doing $300,000 a month. And that's because the processes and systems are in place, and those processes and systems are repeatable. They're not custom one-time projects. So if you're stuck in this situation where you're like, man, I'm totally overwhelmed, and you know how this will end. It ends in burnout, and that's a horrible place to be. You've got to hire, but the only way you can hire effectively and implement and slot people into meaningful roles with tasks that they can actually undertake and get the achieved or desired outcome is to have, checklists and processes and systems around absolutely everything. And back then I didn't. I was making the mistake of saying yes to anyone for anything, and you can't systemize that. So to recap, wrap this video up real quick. Number one, scared to ask for money. My advice is get over it. Start throwing out some big numbers and see what happens. 2, cared too much. Don't make the mistake of caring too much. Yes, do the job, do it to the best of your ability. Make sure the client is getting results, but don't get emotionally involved. And 3, don't make the mistake of trying to do everything yourself. Hire, build a team. And if we circle back to point 1, once you start asking for the right sort of, once you start throwing out big numbers, then you'll have the money to be able to hire and pay people. And that was another issue that I was caught up in. I was like, man, I'm only just making enough to pay myself. There's no way. And you get caught in this vicious cycle. But anyway, those are the 3 biggest mistakes I made. Hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more, head over to bringtheseo.com. We provide business development training for SEO consultants wanting to improve their processes, increase profits, and scale to $100,000 a month or more without all the stress and overwhelm.